Hi, I'm Brittany,
And I'm Cami.
and this is the Deeply Rooted Homeschool. The heart behind this podcast is to encourage and equip you as you start or continue your homeschool journey. If you are considering homeschooling or are new to homeschooling, we created this podcast with you in mind to answer common questions. If you're just finding us, you'll want to go back and catch up on our past episodes. Thanks for joining us today.
Welcome to the Deeply Rooted Homeschool. Today on the podcast, we're going to be talking with our friend Kiki about her more traditional approach to homeschooling, as opposed to the classical model that we've delved into with Amy on episode 4 and 5, and the more Charlotte Mason that we delved into with Anna on episode 6. If you're interested in those models, we encourage you to go back and listen to those episodes. But Kiki's here with us today. So Kiki is a wife and a homeschool mom of 5 boys. She's been homeschooling them all from the start. I've known Kiki for many years now. She and her husband were and still are the campus pastors with the student ministry where I was involved at the university where I attended. In fact, my husband and I met on a retreat with their group. At the time, her oldest son was just a baby, and this makes me feel so old, but he just turned 17. Kiki makes having 5 boys look so easy, and I can't wait to hear some of the wisdom that I know she is going to share with us. So welcome, Kiki. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your family?
Sure. So, like you said, I do have 5 boys, and I was trying to think about like some of the most common questions I have whenever I walk around and 5 boys trail me wherever I go. And the most common question I have, and I get all the time, is, are they all yours? Quickly followed by, are they all boys? And then my least favorite is, were you trying for a girl? And yes, they are all boys. Yes, they're all mine. And no, we were never trying for a girl. We just always trusted that God would make the best decision, and we prayed for a baby. So super, super thankful with the family that God's blessed us with. Like you said, Court just turned 17 and he's going to be a senior. And then I have a 14-year-old boy who will be a freshman. His name's Lane. Kaysen is 11 and will be a 6th grader. Quade is 8 and will be a 3rd grader. And Ransom, my baby, is 5 and going to be a kindergartner. So as I look at my upcoming fall, I see just a ton of emotion. It's going to be an emotionally charged year as I graduate my first senior and also teach my last kindergartner. So that is kind of the boy crew that I lead, and I'm just super thankful for them, and I'm thankful that I've been able to homeschool them from the beginning.
So, Kiki, when did you decide to start homeschooling, and what made it seem like a good fit for your family? What was that process like?
Well, so I graduated with an elementary education degree, and so that is kind of where my love for teaching started. And even though I graduated with that, I never thought that I would homeschool my kids. It just wasn't even in my thoughts at all. I enjoyed teaching. I also nannied a lot. I was just always around kids, came from a big family, always hoped that I would have a big family. And so the number of 5 boys did not surprise me. But I just realized that the closer we got to school age with my oldest boy, I just realized that I truly was the best teacher for him. And I just kept thinking, well, I can teach him kindergarten. Like, you can't mess up kindergarten. I was a kindergarten teacher in the public schools. So I guess it wasn't a scary thought to me to just go ahead and give it a try. And so as kindergarten approached, I really truly was praying about it on my own. And I guess I thought the big hiccup would be trying to convince my husband. And as we were laying in bed one night, I just vividly remember him just turning to me and saying, well, what if you would homeschool? And I seriously about fell out of bed. I've realized what an incredible support system a spouse needs to be when you are homeschooling. It isn't impossible to have your spouse on board with you, but it definitely is helpful if your spouse is in full support. It's needed as you go through the bumps of homeschooling. But when he suggested that, I just knew that it was at least something we needed to try. And so as we went forward with homeschooling, our deal was always that we would pray every school year, and with every boy added, that it would be the thing we were supposed to do or not do. And we just always had peace, and it always just fit into our family life so well that it just it never has come into question again that we would do anything different.
That's powerful.
Wow. It's true. I mean, I hear some people like they really want to, and then their spouse is like, absolutely not. Or you mess this up, they're going back to public school in the fall, like that kind of thing. Or like if they don't get this grade. And I just can't imagine having that pressure. Like it's enough pressure already when you're trying to school and do everything anyways that I think you could homeschool even without their support, but I cannot imagine. It would just be
for sure
not fun.
Okay, so 5 boys, all ages this year, from all the way at the top, all the way down to kindergarten. I can't even imagine that it's easy to actually accomplish anything with that many kids. I know that your boys are all involved in sports and extracurricular activities, and not to mention you're very involved in your co-op. So can you give us a little bit of a window into what your typical day? I know not every day is typical. There's rarely a typical day, but are you more of a strict schedule or a loose routine kind of homeschool mom? And which subjects do you feel like you must get done every day?
I'm a creature of routine, and I, as well as the boys, always function best when we have routine. But yet anybody that's homeschooled for any amount of time can tell you that there's no typical day, unless I'm crazy and there are typical days and we're just missing them. But I have found that with the boys, if we set up before the semester ever starts, I always try and sit down and just jot down what our schedule is going to be for every day. Like, when does soccer practice fall? When do piano lessons fall? When does math outside our home, our 2 oldest boys take at a different co-op? And so when do those things fall? And once I get that all written down, I can plug usually 2 days and just pull those and be like, these are the days, typically Monday and Wednesday, where we plan nothing. And so Monday and Wednesday are our full-on home days. They're completely routine. They're completely predictable. We don't schedule play dates. We don't schedule doctor's appointments. We don't run errands. We are home a lot of times in our pajamas, but completely doing school, completely just set in routine, and leave days like Tuesday, which is always just a little bit more discombobulated, for running errands and setting appointments. And once we're out of the house, we just tend to stay out of the house. Not that that means no school happens, but it might look like an audiobook, or it might look like math at night with daddy, or it might look like, just something on the fly in the doctor's office. They're working on phonics. It just looks different than that just routine of a Monday, Wednesday. Thursday is our co-op day. And so it's basically a full-on school day, with packed lunches and uniforms and teachers of other sorts of moms. And so we're basically out of the house most of the day from like 8 to 2. And by the time we're done with that, no real school happens at the end of that day. And Fridays, I really like to leave open. Even with having the older boys, I've found that if we can kick it really hard on the beginning of the week, sometimes Friday can be a half day or an off day, like even for the little kids for field trips or friends coming over, or just a bonus family day, which I think you need to make sure that you take advantage of when you homeschool, because that's part of what homeschooling is.
But I thought that was really encouraging, because there are so many moms that come to us, and I'm sure come to you, that are looking for, okay, no, seriously, tell me how.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what does this look like? And so you just laid that out. And I feel like in a way that somebody could easily take that and plug in their own, like, oh, okay, well, yeah, because this day is usually busy for us, or this day, my husband does this or whatever. So I feel like that probably gives people a lot of freedom.
Right. I feel like most people think, well, from 8 to 3, you have to be doing school full time. And it's like, I might have had that mindset at the beginning, but now sometimes there's Saturday school. Like if we totally fluff off, like we do school on Saturday, sometimes Sunday afternoons. I mean, it definitely gets done. It just doesn't always look the same, and I know you guys are the same way. It's just, I just can't imagine doing something different.
And I like the idea of having those protected days at home.
Yes.
And I have to do the same thing. I think that Mondays and Wednesdays typically, Wednesdays especially, we're home. We don't go places. We live kind of out of town. So we don't go to town on Wednesdays.
Yes.
And that's our day. We stay in our pajamas, we clean the house, and we do school together.
And that's super important, because they have to have like a feeling of school too,
Yeah, they do.
To where that's good.
Yeah. And I think it helps us to just have those days when you don't go and do. You you just rest, because I feel like even, our kids' hearts need that sometimes.
Yes, no, without a doubt. And I want them to love home. And I mean, I have 5 boys, and even, Court, he loves to be home. It's not uncommon that he'll be home on a Friday night. It's not unnatural for him to think, oh, well, teenage boys don't hang out at home. Home is where he hangs. That's where he will be. And I don't know, it's just different. And I think too, you saying the thing about the 5 kids, I think it's hard to be home, but oh my goodness, I can't imagine running bus lines for 5 kids at 3 different schools. Or and I don't ever want to throw public school, because sometimes that's all they know. And so I don't ever want, but I'm I would much rather be home with my 5 kids, even on a crazy day, than be waking up babies from nap to go pick up big brother. And no thanks.
And it's got to make your mama heart feel good that your grown child wants to be home.
He does.
You've set this up.
Yeah.
You've done something right. Yeah. That at the end, they want to be home with you.
They do. Yeah. It is so sweet, because he's starting to job shadow a land surveyor. He's thinking maybe he's going in that direction. And the number one thing he said when he came home from shadowing that job was, and Mom, I can take my kids with me.
Oh my goodness.
He's like, Mom, I can take my kids with me. And it can be a family job. If it's a close job, I can take him and eat him for lunch and meet my wife, and then send him home. And it's a totally different mindset to where he already is thinking, doesn't even have a girlfriend, but is already thinking, this is what I want my family life to look like. And I pray my daughter-in-laws love me. I pray they just love me and they see all the effort, because there's a lot of effort.
There is a lot of effort. Yeah. So I want to pick up on something that you said a minute ago, and that's that you kind of have to fight to be home. And I think that is a stark contrast to what most people think about when they think about homeschooling, is that they're just always at home and they never go anywhere. But I know all 3 of us at this table, that's not the reality, and that you do have to fight to be home and to protect that time. And I think that that's interesting.
No, without a doubt. I just don't think our society thinks of home as being a safe haven. And I think people just compare their lives to others, and they think that, well, neighbors are going and they're involved in all this. And there's just, just a weird sense of competition and busyness. And I think that's something that can and usually does set homeschoolers apart, is there's just a different focus put on the actual being of home and savoring home and making home important.
So one thing, Kiki, that I've always noticed about your family and admired, as I've seen your family grow and change over the years, is that you guys have such a strong sense of family identity. Your people know that they're your people, and that I can see them in public and I know that they are Kiki's son. I know that because of how they're acting and how they carry themselves. What do you think that you have done over the years to create or to foster that? And what are ways that you strengthen those bonds between your kids and between you as the parent and your kids?
Well, I tried to think back about when my husband, Matt, and I decided that it was okay to be different. And I couldn't really pinpoint a time that really stood out, but I feel like that has kind of become our mantra, just that it really is okay to look and be different, whether it's saying no to the soccer season and just getting out of the rat race a little bit to catch your breath, or whether it's homeschooling, or whether, here we are, a family of all boys, and we've never owned a gaming system, just because we know the addiction that lies there, and we know that that's not where we want our boys' minds and hearts to be focused. And so even though it feels like a hard no sometimes at the beginning, we know that difference sets us apart and that it's noticeable. And it's definitely nothing that we're prideful about, but we try and show the boys that as they grow older and we look at, different friends they've had along the way, or different situations they've been in and how they've responded, we really can usually chalk it up to we've never tried to be just like everybody else. And I feel like a lot of times there's a lot of even parental peer pressure where we think that kids are dealing with it and we're trying to protect our kids. But I think sometimes it's hard for parents to stand up against other parents and just say no to busyness, or no to one extra thing, or signing their family up for one more commitment. And I think if you just keep your center, on God, and just preaching at your kids that it's okay to be different and look different, and that's really what we're called to be, that they'll grow up with that, and that they'll see that it really is okay.
That's hard though. Like that's something that we have to try to cultivate that.
Anytime like Matt and I feel the pressure, it's usually because we're feeling the pressure.
Mm-hmm. Right.
The kids are fine.
Right.
The kids are fine, but it's like, it's you hear this talk on the sidelines, oh, they're doing this. Are we no, we're not doing that. Like, of course we're not doing that. That's not
who we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we have to remind each other, because sometimes Matt's getting pulled one way and I have to be like, no, but it's amazing. Like marriage. It's just, he's usually strong when I'm not, and vice versa. And
do y'all have like a family mission statement or something that you come back to all the time? Nothing formal?
Nothing formal. We talked about that at our co-op in one of the classes I taught, and one of the families had a really sweet one, and it's always been my goal. Oh, I want to have that. But we just never have,
I'm actually really, really encouraged that you don't.
Me too. That's what I was going to say.
Here you are, you've got all these encouraging things to say about your family. It's okay to look and be different, all of that stuff. But you don't have a formal mission statement. I think that's really great.
Well, I think it's shifting though. Like even as the boys grow older, it's hard to have a 5-year-old and a 17-year-old and just like have it be the same. Like I guess when they were all younger, it would be easy. And not that we couldn't have had one, but I have been, I have thought about it, and we have talked about it. It's just never Matt. That isn't Matt's thing.
But you have values.
Yeah, I would say values. I would hope
you have the things.
Yeah, I hope so. Maybe without it being written down.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
You know who you are. You know whose you are. All of that, and that's important.
Yeah.
Okay. So all ages of kids. Mm-hmm. That can be such a challenge, especially for new homeschool mamas, to have a baby or toddler and be attempting to get their older kids to sit down and pay attention and get schoolwork done. That's maybe not as much of a struggle for you now as when your kids were a little younger. But can you talk to us about how you managed to get school done during a season when you had babies and toddlers around?
Well, I'm definitely a creature of routine. And I do feel like I always have set that well in our home. I function better. The boys seem to function better. So definitely was a napper. Had the boys on a strict nap schedule, a strict quiet time schedule. I also really, I guess, setting people up for success is kind of what I like to think of it as. I'm going to try and set the boys up for success. So, I will get school ready the night before, and each of my older boys will have a stack of school, with their lesson plan book on top. And so it's nothing I have to mess with in the morning. So the younger boys kind of get my attention as the older boys are taking off after job and breakfast and their piano lessons and all that stuff. They're able to just take off without needing me for anything. Once my boys have hit that real fluent reading age, usually second, third grade, they really don't even look at me until probably 10:30, 11 in the morning. They have their work, they know what to do. And that really just gave me that free time with the younger kids to set them up for success and love on them and do laundry with them and bath with them, just stuff that was important to get them going. I also just, would come up with a list. Whenever I was making a list for what our days were going to look like for staying home and being gone, I would always come up with like a new list each semester, like with just creative, silly things that I could fall back on if everything else was failing. Whether it was, filling up a kitchen sink with soap and all the spoons in the house for the kid to stand on a bench and wash, or, rice on the driveway and everyone goes out on the driveway, that needs me and while the baby plays there, or just audiobooks. Oh my goodness, my boys, if you can get a baby to keep headphones on, my littles, probably starting at like 18 months, would sit there and just listen to audiobooks. And I mean, who can be mad at audiobooks? I just think I'd much rather have my young child listening to an audiobook and using their imagination than sitting in front of a show. And not that shows were never used, because they definitely were. But I just always try to be set up for success. I guess that's the only thing I can fall back on, is having a plan and not waking up to crazy, because you usually wake up to crazy, and just not having somewhere to go with it. Setting the big boys up, having them have a plan and a routine, and then, kind of being willing to give myself to the little boys until it was nap time. That was probably my secret to success.
And then so you capitalize on that nap time and come back with the bigger kids then.
Yep. And that's when we would do like our read aloud science. And if for some reason the littles weren't sleeping or whatever, they would always just join in. Like, you wouldn't think Apologia Science would be that exciting, but you give them a crayon and a piece of paper and tell them to draw what they hear. And there's hearts and, all kinds of stuff. And, we use a whiteboard. And I mean, my kids as young as like 2 or 3, like they would just start writing down what they saw, and it was never in the right order, but it was always, what it meant something to them. And they glean. Like, you'd be amazed how much little kids glean. And as much as they want to do school when they're 2 and 3, it fades as they get older. But my most like hungry learners are always the youngest ones. They always want to be doing what the older kids are doing, even if the older kids don't want to be doing what the older kids are doing.
So somebody that is looking for like tips and tricks, you would say set yourself up for success, not to wake up to crazy type of thing, that type of thing.
Stay up 5 minutes later. Stay up 5 minutes later at night and get school set out. Have your plan made. Don't think you're going to wake up earlier than the kids, because you won't. Or I never did. Don't think, oh, well, I'll do it in the morning. Like, on those days that you're going to be home, have a plan, like look at your lesson plans, kind of see what the day's supposed to hold. And then even like for the little kids, one thing I do is I kind of set up stations. Like, say in the playroom, I'd put out Duplos, and in their bedroom, I'd put out, oh man, name another toy, Thomas the Train. And then in my bedroom, I'd put out blocks or something. And they just knew they could go to those 3 places and play. And then, I might swap them out and put them someplace else. Or, there's 1,000 things you can do to just keep it new and entertaining. And my little boys always loved to wake up and see what was set up where. And it didn't take much to do. It just took a little forethought.
That's really sweet. That's really sweet. And I feel like that's what a lot of people are wondering. Like, I've got a lot of friends with, little toddlers that are like right under their feet all day long. And they're like, how can I teach when this one is crawling on me? But that's really fun. Like, the surprise of it all.
Yeah.
That's really sweet.
Yeah, and I've definitely had friends that say, they keep certain toys back that the kids can only play with during school, and that totally, has worked, and I encourage that too. I think that's great. Our toys just are we just have a toy room, and the boys know where everything basically is. We don't have them all over the place, and so it just seemed to help to move stuff about.
But even doing something like, one thing my 4-year-old loves is I will dump all the puzzles out in the middle of the floor and then line the boards up around the rug. And he has to go, all the pieces are mixed together, and he has to figure out which one goes to which puzzle. And that will keep him entertained for hours. While we're doing school.
No, I've done that with silverware. I've pulled all the silverware out of a drawer. Like, my 5-year-old, last year he was 4, but he just loves to organize. Like, pull all the Tupperware out of the drawer and just be like, have fun. And they think they're really doing something great. Yeah. And, they are.
It entertains them. And it keeps them out of your hair while you're doing school with the others.
Exactly.
All right. So, Kiki, let's talk about curriculum a little bit. A lot of people have reached out to us asking us about the type of curriculum that we use. And I think when you're just getting started, there's so many choices, and that can feel so overwhelming. You don't even know where to start. People want to know which subjects you actually purchase curriculum for. And you seem like you come towards homeschooling with a little bit more of a traditional curriculum and co-op type of approach. Do you mix and match curriculum brands across subjects, or do you use all of one brand? And which specific subjects do you teach your boys?
I definitely mix and match. I have my favorites. I definitely am not afraid to switch it up. And I even have found so much that the way one boy learns math is not the way another boy learns math. And I can't imagine if there was a girl in the mix, because I definitely feel like there's different giftings for boys versus girls and on down the line. And so even just having all 5 boys, I can see that they learn differently and at different speeds. And so I've never been afraid to mix it up. There are definitely ones I love. Because I was a kindergarten teacher before I started homeschooling, I just fell in love with Explode the Code for Phonics. So that is one that I start like from K4, K3, K4, and the boys will do a new book a semester, like through probably fourth grade is about when it ends. But I have found that it is one when you mix with lots of reading, lots of audiobooks, lots of just exposure to words, that you will just breed children that love to read. It's just a fun curriculum. It's super cheap. $8 off Amazon. You don't even have to get it from, like a book supplier. It's just really easy to get your hands on. And I have suggested it to so many people. So that is probably like my number one love for young kids, and one that I really push, because I feel like once you get kids reading and having some kind of success on their own, they just take off from there. And not that they don't need you for other subjects, but reading is just so paramount. So that would be the one for the youngers. I definitely, if there were 3 subjects that I would make encourage the boys to do on a daily basis, it's definitely reading and writing of some sort, whether it's journaling or practicing cursive or writing a letter or making a list, like just anything that's going on in our day, just depending on the day. I definitely, boys need to write in general. It's not their favorite thing to do. And so they definitely write every day, they read every day, and they do math, some sort of math. And I even like to stretch math out into the summer. I'm never mad if a subject isn't 100% complete by school year's end, because I find that if you can even draw things out into the summer and do it, 2-3 times a week, you are going to go back into the school year with such more on top of it. Kids that have retained more, kids that aren't forgetting what they've missed in 3 months. It's not that I'm not for some sort of break. When we go on vacation, we leave everything behind, no matter what time of year it is. I think that's important. We bring books, but never school on vacation. There's time for breaks, but I don't see summer as being like a full break from school. So one of my thoughts with math, as far as curriculum goes, is I really like to switch up math like every year or two. I feel like I will do a basic overhaul of math for my like elementary to middle school kids. And whether they're all doing Horizons one year, they're doing Life of Fred, they're doing Matthew C. I just like to swap it out, because again, I feel like math is one of those things that I think some kids could learn it very basically, just the way it's laid out. And then other times they need manipulatives, and other times they just learn different. And so I'm always trying to think of going wide. So anytime I can go wide, that's what I try and do, and just offer as much exposure and as many different learning styles as possible. And then once my boys reach 7th grade, I actually send them to a different co-op for math. And they have just the most amazing and creative math teacher at this co-op. And she has taught my boys from 7th grade on up, which is really great because it's not my strong suit. And I feel like I can get them to about 7th grade. And then I am very happy to have her answer all of their questions and meet with them one-on-one. And, they answer to her for everything. And so that is just something I'm super thankful for. Grammar is something else, another one that I think has kind of fallen by the wayside, but I really, really, really like first language lessons for just that beginning grammar stuff that I've even forgotten, that I think it just drives home so many rules and so many thoughts into how language is written, that I again think helps into reading. So I really recommend that one. And then spelling, like we do IEW, Excellence in Writing, is just one of my all-time favorites for writing, which they get at the co-op that we go to. But they have a spelling program called Phonetic Zoo that is very just self-paced. That it's like a 3-year, I would say, program. But depending on what kind of a speller you are, it can go shorter than that, and it can also go longer, just because it's kind of self-paced. So those are the things that I really hit at home. I hit writing, like handwriting. They do math at home until 7th grade. We do grammar, and what else did I say? Spelling. Spelling would be the other thing, as well as phonics and writing kind of thing. So I've found that there's kind of an argument always between handwriting and cursive and what they prefer. And I have 3 boys that are absolutely awesome printers and 2 that cannot print to save their lives. And so we just moved on to cursive with them. And I really think that cursive is a lost art. And I think it's so important because I think it just works your brain so much differently than just regular penmanship. And so my 2 boys that do cursive are just my creative boys, my more creative boys, and the boys that their brains just work generally different. And so I just think it's super interesting that I've had the time and the ability to kind of notice that about them and be able to invest in something as simple as just a handwriting curriculum for them just to see how it expands their thought. And so that's what they get all at home. And then at our co-op, there's always a history block, a literature block, a science block, a writing block, and then an elective block. And that elective block can be anything from cooking class to sign language class to entrepreneurship or business as missions. It can be drama. It just is whatever the moms are feeling like they want to teach, because we're a full mom taught co-op. If your kid goes to co-op, you're there teaching all day. And so it's kind of whatever the moms are feeling at that point, and if they want to offer those classes, that's what their final elective class is.
I'm taking notes mainly because I want to go, which we do IEW for writing too, and I love IEW, but I've never done Phonetic Zoo.
Oh,
so I'm like,
so good. It's a little expensive to buy, like it's $100 a disc, but if you're starting with your first, I mean, it's well worth it because it's just, like, you might notice that your son just will like breeze through it super fast because it's just like, basically you listen to the disc, they have earphones on, which again is a big deal. They put in the computer. I'm not even a part of it. They have a notebook, they learn the rule, and they have to write it out, and once they get 100% on a test twice, they move on. And so they could do 3 lessons in a week, or 2 lessons, but then they might hit a really hard lesson and it might take
them for a little bit.
Yeah. But it's so good. And then when I feel like the boys are stalling out or sick of that, I pull out the good old bananagrams.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you guys can, bananagram, spell those words. You don't have to write and listen every day, but you can do bananagrams, or we'll do like oral spelling tests or whatever. Like I try and mix it up so that it's not completely always the same.
Right.
But even, I feel like with curriculum, if you're just a little bit, like even with those Explode the Code books, like I always add in stuff. Like I always make them split compound words or whatever. Once they get kind of more comfortable with it, I try and add a little bit because I'm not a huge like workbook them to death fan. But I feel like, you can always be just do a little bit more than even what the book says.
Than what we need. Yeah.
Yeah, my 6-year-old is not picking up print very well. He taught himself.
Sure.
While I was teaching, my oldest to read and write, my very first experience with this as well. And I was all in on him thinking, little brother is playing or whatever. Well, little brother wasn't playing. Little brother was teaching himself to read and write. And so he came in knowing how to read.
Sure.
And I'm just going back like, well, what do I teach you now? Like, oh, but you write really weird, weird to me.
Sure.
Because, you write in such a way. You write from the top to bottom, and it's supposed to look a certain way or whatever. And he's over there writing from the bottom up and doing his own thing. And then I find that he's wanting to make it cursive. Like he's wanting to make his own thing. So hearing you say that, just move on. Just move on. Try something else. Like his brain is different. Yeah. He's a creative kid, and he really is a creative kid. So to hear you say that it turns out those are your more creative minded kids.
It really,
and that's okay.
And if you could find like what interests him, like, so my older of the creative boys, he is like a history guru, like absolutely just soaks in everything history. I mean, he would write cursive all day, but my goodness, I got my hands on Classical Conversations, history-based cursive. That kid is like writing out the Declaration of Independence in cursive, and he's writing out the Mayflower Compact, and it's not just something he's writing, like he's making this beautiful art, like he's trying to write like the founding fathers, and it's just beautiful to see. Like you don't see many 14-year-old boys who are, trying to create something beautiful. They might They might be more drawn to a computer. And I do think there's time for typing, and there's time for definitely learning how to do that kind of thing. And that falls into place. But I just think writing is a lost art. And I've always just encouraged my boys to keep a journal. That's their summer writing, is they keep a journal. And, when we travel or when we whatever, they're always writing. I'm just always trying to foster that, because I don't think it's the first thing that boys fall to. So I'm always kind of trying to teach to their weakness.
Okay, so I have a question about that, because I want to encourage my oldest to write in a journal, but I don't know how to direct them in that. How do you direct them? Like, here's your journal, start writing. Like, what do you say?
Well, sometimes I give them something to write about. Like sometimes, we'll have just gotten back from something field trip-ish, or something that's just kind of sparked something in my mind that I think they should have something to say about it, and I'll encourage that. Sometimes it's just if they're not feeling like writing, I'm fine with them drawing something and then writing about what they drew. Sometimes they just don't want to write, and I try to not frustrate them. The Bible verse about not frustrating or nagging, like I think we all struggle with it. And when you're trying to be both teacher and mom, I think it can just be such a fine line between when they need to follow your direct order or when you can kind of make something work better for them. I'm not always good at it, but I do try to not frustrate them and to kind of just go with, okay, you don't feel like writing today, sketch something, write something short about what you've sketched. I just want you to remember this trip, this park, this moment. And the little journals that we have from years of even travel, like when we've been overseas, my goodness, they go back, they will pull out those Africa journals and all of their stories are right there. And you can't buy that. Like you can't go back and you think you're going to remember stuff. Your kids, they think, oh, I'll remember that always. And you just don't. And so I just think writing is such a lost art that we need to keep fostering.
Can I interject something here? So I'm an OT. We've talked about that before, but in something that I did for one of my continuing ed courses, it was about handwriting. And when you write something by hand, it's the equivalent of reading it 7 times.
I believe it.
So it digs that groove that much deeper into your brain. And that's why it's so important for like you were talking about the Mayflower Compact and the Declaration of Independence. It's so important to write those things. It helps you to memorize them. Memories or those things as well.
Yeah. No,
and I mean, this is a whole other, we don't have to talk about this here, but but also the cursive. If you have a kid that has sensory issues or struggles with dyslexia or any other learning disability at all, cursive is much easier for them because it only goes in one direction. You can't go backwards with it. So if you're listening and you have a kid like that, cursive may be a little bit easier for you. Don't fight the print battle. Teach them cursive.
Yeah. And I know some schools just aren't even touching cursive anymore. And I personally think it's kind of sad. I think I know they can't teach separate things to each kid, but I feel like that's one thing that as homeschool moms, we can notice something in our kids and go wide with it. Like it doesn't have to look the same for every kid, even in our own family. It can look different, and that's okay. And that's what makes you the best teacher for your own kid.
That's the freedom of homeschooling, is that you can do that for your kids.
That's true.
Okay, Kiki, so just to summarize real quick, because you have given us so much good stuff. You said that you do 4 subjects for the most part at your house, right? So math, English grammar, spelling, and handwriting.
That's right.
And then you outsource history, science, those things at your co-op. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, that's right.
Okay, so off the record, we were kind of talking, and you mentioned that your son is taking the ACT, your oldest son right now. So tell me a little bit about that process. How are y'all handling the ACT in college and whatever comes next as you've got a senior this year?
Well, I definitely think it's a different dog than what it was when I was in high school. When I was in high school back in the 90s, I took the ACT one time, and it was a free ACT given by my high school. I didn't open the packet. I didn't study. I feel like that was kind of the common thing. I spent the night at a friend's house the night before, woke up and took the ACT, and that was the end of it. It got me into college. Surely didn't get many scholarship opportunities because of my score, but I didn't know too many people that did. And I feel like nowadays there's so many different directions you can go with ACT. And I'm honestly curious how much longer the ACT is going to be a thing. I'm definitely not an expert, but I just feel like there's just such a pull towards ACT prep classes and ACT prep courses. And there's just so much offered to people who can afford it or parents that are super involved and that care, that it kind of leaves another sect of kids who are just stuck with the one-time ACT. And to me, I'm always a fairness person, and that just doesn't feel fair. I know that you can take it up to 12 times. I mean, you have to pay for it, but you can take it up to 12 times, and you have to be done by Christmas or the December time of your senior year of high school. You can't take it beyond that and have it count. And so that's kind of where the pressure lies. And they've also started introducing something called super scoring, which I think is fairly new. And not every college or university has adopted, but most are headed that way, where you can take, your best 4 scores from any given test. It doesn't have to be from the same test. So some kids might, study the math section and go in and flub the rest of it, but get, a super high score on math, and you use that grade or that score. And then you will study science for the next test. Take all 4, but get a super high score in science. And again, a fairness thing. I'm not sure it's fair or not, but if you're willing and able to do it that way, you can do it. And so Court has taken it several times, I think 3 times, and he definitely has shown improvement each time. And I think for a $50 test, if it's equaling scholarship money that he will indeed need to pay for his college, as he will be paying for his own college, as my husband and I both did, we just keep encouraging him that every point equals extra money and more money that he will not have to pay to the tune of college debt and college loans. And so that's the way we encourage him, is we try and tell him that it equals money for him in the long run. And for $50, you can't be mad at a test.
So can you tell us, I know this is not something that we told you to prepare for, but tell us, how do you keep a transcript? You've got 2 high schoolers this year, right?
Yes.
What do you do with that?
Yes. So again, I think it's something that can be super overwhelming for parents, and especially with that first kid. So my recommendation, and it would be, it came down to me from a mama that went before me, starting about 8th grade, keep track of everything your child does. It can be just on a pages note in your computer. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You just put, fall classes, you type them all out, you give them a grade, you tell what the teacher is, just because you will forget at some point. If they get a grade or something written out, print it out, keep it in a folder for them. But also include things like maybe travels that they've taken. Did they go overseas? Did they go to a camp? Did they do anything in a leadership position? Are they in youth group? Are they a youth leader? Do they plan a worship band? What are they doing that sets them apart from just your average high schooler? And if you start doing that in 8th grade, you will end up with a beautiful transcript that really looks different than most others, because it just has their life laid out on a piece of paper that just kind of tells a story of who your child is becoming.
We really love to ask each person who comes on our podcast this same question, because the answers have really been different and encouraging. A lot of people are looking into homeschooling, especially this year. What is one piece of advice you'd give someone who's just starting on this homeschool journey? Maybe some books that you would recommend.
Well, first, something that I feel like I've said 1,000 times to parents who've commented that they could never do it, or that they wanted to try, but maybe not this year. I always look them dead in the eye and I tell them, you can do it. You can do it. It's kind of a matter of if you're willing to try. And I don't mean that ugly at all. Like, I think that people can be discouraged and think that school has to look a certain way, and it just doesn't. I think parents often forget that they were their kid's first teacher, and that they really should be their child's primary teacher in everything. And because they feel uncomfortable with certain topics or certain subjects that maybe they've forgotten, you're basically turning around and teaching your child everything you at some point knew. And you can relearn it again. I'm not saying that it's always easy, or that it always, it doesn't take time, but there's so many resources out there, and there's so many people that are willing to help, that anybody that is truly wanting to try, I always tell them they can do it. They can do it via online school. They can do it with resources that are out there. They can hire tutors. They can do it themselves. They can even, do night school if they need to work during the day and have it look a little bit different. It doesn't have to be, the typical school day every day. And so you can do it would definitely be what I would tell them. And just not to forget that they were their child's first teacher, and that even though, maybe teaching school subjects doesn't feel natural to them, being with your child all day and learning just right alongside them is such a beautiful thing. Okay, so and if I were to suggest books, so this was I love to read, but I also have my favorites that I just reread all the time. So so first, I think in order to homeschool, you have to have a strong marriage. So my marriage book is I, Isaac, Take Thee, Rebecca by Ravi Zacharias. And it is just such a beautiful marriage book. I mean, even if you're not married, if you're engaged, if you're dating, but marriage, it's just such a beautiful book about marriage and partnership. So that is definitely my first book. And then you move on to home building, because once you're married, you're going to want to build your home and kind of set a standard. So that book is The Most Important Place on Earth by Robert Wohlgemuth. And it just kind of sets a standard for how to make your house, look different, smell different, just be the place in the neighborhood that people want to be, because there's just something different about your home. And then once the babies start coming, the book that I would recommend is Give Them Grace by Elise Fitzpatrick. And it is a child rearing book that is so simple, but yet so profound. When you read it, it just kind of changes everything you think about how you should react with your kids, and how you should be willing to admit that you also sin, and that you're going to go alongside them. And it's not I can't believe you did this, but more, hey, let's grow in this together, and let's change together. And then my good old homeschooling book is Teaching from Rest by Sarah Mackenzie. And it's just such a classic homeschooling guide to just make sure that you have your life ordered in a way that you can teach in the best way possible. And then once you get the teenagers in the house, Age of Opportunity by Paul David Tripp. And that book is just a beautiful journey of relating to and teaching and coming alongside your teenager, and just really embracing the opportunity of having a teenager in the house, because I think so many times people leave their teenagers alone. And I think our kids are crying as teenagers to not be left alone. And they might be crying for it in different ways. Like it might even look like rebellion, or it might look different than what you think it should look like. But our teenagers don't want to be left alone. And this book, Age of Opportunity, will definitely teach you how to interact and continue to grow your teenagers until they're ready to leave the house.
Teenagers are crying to not be left alone.
It's true.
That is so powerful.
It's so true, though. Like I tell you, like the picture that I keep getting on, like I always refer to the soccer sidelines, because like that's where I hear the most parents. And when I say worldly parents, I'm just saying not my homeschool friends. But my kid wouldn't come out of their room because they were playing video games all day Saturday, and yours too. And I'm like, but that's not normal. Like that shouldn't be, and it's like they're just afraid. It's almost like they're checking with each other, like, oh, your kid does that too. Okay, well then it's normal. I'm not going to interfere because boys play video games all the time, or girls, are going to watch movies nonstop, or Netflix binges all weekend long is completely normal for a teenage girl. I'm not going to sit with her. That's her thing. She's having her time. I just think so many times people think their kids want to be left alone, and they really don't. They want you to come alongside them. And I think sometimes that just feels foreign to people who aren't with their kids every day.
Yeah. You're talking about teenagers don't want to be left alone. Talk to me a little bit about how do you transition them and teach them responsibility and chores, and how do you give them other things? Like, okay, so video games aren't a part of your life, which is amazing. Mm-hmm. How do you give them other things? Where do you direct them? What do you do?
Well, I definitely think, again, with each child, you have a different personality, you have a different set of standards. They definitely have different things that they value. And in our house, it's just kind of run on a maturity / responsibility equals privilege. There's definitely times that, the responsibility and the maturity isn't showing. So there's just none of that extra privilege, whether I'm dealing with a boy who really values staying up late, staying up late with the older brothers, like that's seen as a prize for my middle boy. He just, I mean, if he can stay up beyond the little boys, like he would do just about anything. But there are times that like his attitude during the day or just his lack of helpfulness throughout the house just doesn't give him that privilege. And so I feel like we kind of deal with it in that sense. It isn't, there's just kind of an unspoken rule of expectation. And, there's definitely times where I need to speak into that and tell them they're not matching up to what they should be doing. And then just the privilege isn't there, and it's funny what is valuable to each boy. My fourth boy loves to go on bike rides with the older boys. Like they bike to the nearest bike trail, and today he just wasn't able to go. He was having a really hard time kind of controlling himself and not talking back. And maybe to most 8-year-olds, losing a bike ride with his brothers wouldn't be a big deal. But for this particular 8-year-old, that is his gold. And so I kind of know how to barter with what's important to them. And I know my boys intimately enough that I know what's special to them. And not that I try and withhold special, but with responsibility comes privilege. And they kind of have that understanding down.
All right. So one more question, just for fun. At this point in your homeschool mom career, I'm sure that you have figured out exactly what you can't live without. So what are your can't live without homeschool supplies?
So I made a list.
Yes, we love
Amazon
lists.
Prime. I don't know how life happened before Amazon Prime. And during coronavirus, it really threw me off because there are so many times that a project pops up or we're out of, pencils or color crayons or, fill in the blank. My boys are done reading all the books in a series, and it is so nice to not have to load up everybody to go to the store. And so Amazon Prime is my number one. A well-stocked reading library. I love that I have all boys and that I can just keep going on the same kind of feel of books. Like there's definitely different draws for each kid, but I am never mad at having to order more books. Like anytime, they've read through something, I'm always the first one on Amazon Prime again, ordering up a new set of books. I love having a well-stocked library. Double-sided tape. I don't know what it is about double-sided tape, but it has saved the Carpenter family from a lot of trouble. Double-sided tape, you definitely need it. My 5-year-old even asked for it in his Christmas stocking. Double-sided tape. He got his very own. It was a very big deal. Decent pencils. A supportive spouse. A mama who has gone before you is gold. You need a mama that's gone before you, that can teach you, that can show you what worked for her, that can give you new ideas. Not that your homeschooling career is going to look at all like hers, but it's going to reflect certain things. And if you have a mama that's gone before you, it is going to help you in so many ways. And my most favorite is quiet time. Me and my people, we love each other, but we get sick of each other. And so I am always a fan. Every day, if we are home, we separate. We go into different rooms. We read, the little boys nap. Even my 8-year-old naps on the days that we're home. It's just, there's something beautiful about separating for a while and then coming back together. Everybody's happy to see each other again. You think, things are going south in the house. Oh, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. But man, the times that we've separated for an hour, it just helps everybody. So quiet time is definitely, it might not be a homeschool supply, but it's that important to me.
I love your take on this when we ask about supplies, and you were just like, these are important to me. So maybe you can't go buy them on Amazon. You can't buy a supportive spouse on Amazon.
You can, but it's still so important.
It's that important. So I love that. Kiki, thank you so much for coming to chat with us today. You have been so encouraging and gave us so many things to think about. But would you mind praying for us today?
I would love to. Okay, so God, we thank you so much for this time. I thank you, God, for the opportunity that we have to talk about homeschooling, to talk about our kids, to talk about our families, to talk about things that are important to us as moms. God, I know you're in it all, and we see you in it all. And even in the hard days, God, we're so thankful for the life that you've laid out for us. So God, to everyone that's listening, I just pray, God, for direction for them. I pray for peace in their families, God. I pray that if they are considering a homeschool journey, God, that they will feel you with them in the journey. I pray, God, that they will have people surround them that are supportive, people that are around them, God, that can offer help and assistance. God, I pray that they'll never feel alone. I pray, God, that if homeschooling is the answer for their family, God, that they will always feel confident in their decision, and that, God, that they will always have you right with them. And God, I pray for just the school system, God, as we go, continue to go through the summer, God, and we look towards even the public schools and their decisions, God. I cannot imagine being one of those people in power. I wouldn't want it for all the world. And so, God, I just pray for them. I pray, God, that they will make the right decisions for the area that they're over. I pray that they'll make the right decisions, God, that protect the children and that protect the teachers, but that also fosters school and learning and all of the things that the kids and the teachers and the staff have missed over these last months, God. I just pray protection over hearts and protection over minds and protection of fear, and just that you will be in it all, God. We see you. We know that you're in it, God. None of it is a surprise to you, God. It's all just a puzzle to us, God, but you see it all, and we're thankful for that. So we trust you and we thank you. And be with everyone tonight, God. Amen.
Thanks again for joining us. We hope you were blessed and encouraged by today's episode. Make sure you check the show notes for links to everything that we talked about in today's episode. And make sure you check us out on social media at The Deeply Rooted Homeschool.